In this series, I would like to explain the secrets of temporality, that what are some of the hidden dimensions of time. And in this first conversation, I want to explain the concept of practical temporality. Now, temporality is the study of time, and practical temporality would mean the study of practical time. Now, practical time is the notion of time that most people are familiar with, and therefore, the first conversation is going to be about the general understanding of time in everyday life. Now, time has been divided into three broad categories, and we call them past, present, and future. And this is the broadest category of temporality, which is very useful for practical reasons. For example, we want to distinguish things which have happened in the past, and we want to distinguish them from the things which are happening right now and the things that might happen in the future. So unless we have these three divisions of time, we cannot meaningfully distinguish between things that have already happened and the things that will happen in the future and the things that are happening right now. So the first notion of practical temporality is to distinguish things that have already happened from the things that might happen in the future. Of course, we don't know whether the things that we think will happen in the future will indeed happen. It's only the probability with which we can possibly predict whether a certain thing is going to happen in the future or not. So, practical temporality and the so-called tense, or a division of time into three categories, they are very useful in order to organize individual as well as collective reality of a group or of the human species, in fact. So to say that there is no past or there is no present or there is no future would simply be a denial of practical temporality. Now, it's important to understand that we constantly hear that we should live in the present and we should not live in the past and we should not live in the future. But the reality is that we all live in a synthetic time. We live, part of our day in the past. We live part of our day in the future, and we live part of our day in the present. By which I mean is that our mind is constantly shuffling between the things that have happened in the past and the things that might happen in the future. But at the same time, our physical body is living every moment of the present. And that is also a reality of practical time, that our physical body lives in the present, whereas our mind, our thought process, can shuffle between past and future, and sometimes it has a very synthetic view where it joins all three divisions of time. Now, the other notion of practical time is that temporality is a measurement. For example, we measure distance in feet or yards or miles or meters. So a yard or a meter or a mile, it's a measurement of distance. And if we want to measure the distance between 2 points, then we need some kind of standard, some kind of measurement unit in order to determine the distance between 2 points. If it is a small distance, then we have smaller units like centimeters or even millimeters. And if it is a very long distance, then we might use a bigger unit such as a mile. Now similarly, temporality is a measurement, a standard, and we have small units and we have big units. For example, seconds and minutes and hours, you can say these are the micro units, whereas days, weeks, and years and centuries, these are big units, these are macro units. In order to find the temporal distance between 2 points. So we say that a typical month is of 30 days. So we are measuring the distance of a month in days. Similarly, for micro units, we may say that a person ran this distance in 5 minutes. So again, we have moment 1 and moment 2, and the distance between moment 1 and moment 2 is a time distance, and we measure that either in small units, micro units, or in big units called macro units. Now, for practical purposes, both micro units and macro units are very, very significant. Human life would be impossible to organize without some notion of measuring time. Now, historically, if we go back many centuries, we find that the day and the night, they were very significant units of measuring time. And the sun and the moon, they were critical for determining the units of time. For example, without the moon, the concept of a month perhaps would not have been possible. Because the lunar month, the first day of the moon, and then the full moon after 14 days, and then the moon begins to decrease in size, and then it disappears. And so the first day of the moon and last day of the moon constitutes the lunar month. And a lunar month could either be 29 days or 30 days. It cannot be 28 days, and it cannot be 31 days. So the lunar month was a perfect natural method of calculating the concept of a month. And Islamic law and Jewish law both recognize the lunar months as the most natural conceptions of the macro unit of a month. Now, again, historically, before the watches and clocks were invented, and before we created more precise micro units, the day was divided into bigger segments like morning, noon, afternoon, evening, and then the night was, divided into early night, midnight, and late night, and then very early morning. which was still part of the night. So these broad units or divisions of a day and a night were our first small units or micro units, that I will see you in the morning, or let us meet for a meal in the evening. And these were very meaningful divisions of a day in order to organize individual and communal events. So we find that that the invention of clocks and watches have given us a more precise understanding of microtemporality. In fact, our modern technology, our machines, they're so precise that in order to operate them, we need a very precise conception of microtemporality. So therefore, even the unit of a second has been further subdivided into milliseconds. So 1 second has been further divided into 1,000 units, and one small unit or 1,000th unit of a second is the millisecond. So I think this conception of very precise microtemporality is critical for the functioning of many modern machines and technologies. But human beings, I think, still do not, arrange their events at the level of milliseconds. I think perhaps we are sensitive to minutes. Definitely we are sensitive to the hours, that I will meet you at 11 o'clock. And we might say I will meet you at 11:15, but very few people are going to say I will meet you at 11:15 and 20 seconds. So I think our human life is still not, oriented towards milliseconds, but the machines have been oriented towards milliseconds. So from a practical viewpoint, micro units are very important in order to organize events of the day, in order to coordinate the activity of different individuals. For example, if I say that the class would begin at 11:30, and all the students, they are also familiar with this scheduling, that the class would begin on Wednesday at 11:30 in room 115. So this information, which has both the information about time and information about space. So this spatiotemporality information is absolutely critical for organizing this class and for coordinating the meetings of the students and the teacher at the same time. So it is not enough to say that I will meet you on Wednesday at 11:30, because that is only temporality, and 11:30 hopefully during the day. So 11:30 a.m. And then you say in room number 115. So room number 115 is determining a space that everybody knows where room 115 is, because it is located within a larger building, maybe the university or maybe the department of a university, and then room within that department. So all this information is needed in order to schedule a class. And without this information, we would not be able to schedule a class. People wouldn't know where to go from a spatial viewpoint, and they wouldn't know when to go from a temporal viewpoint. So spatiotemporality scheduling requires both a very clear conception of time and a very clear conception of space. So from a practical viewpoint, these micro units and macro units of time that I will meet you on December 15th, 2014 at 4 p.m. Now, this information has both micro units and macro units. The macro unit is that it is going to be 2014. It's going to be the month of December. And then the micro units will tell us, what time exactly during the day that has been fixed for meeting. So practical temporality requires a very clear understanding of both micro units and macro units. Now, furthermore, going back to the concept of past, present, and future, history, for example, is a recording of the past. We would say that the American Revolution occurred in 1776. So we have this, point in the past where we have fixed the independence of the United States from Great Britain. Then we have a day within 1776 and the 4th of July, for example. And then we have 1789, another point in history, again a macro unit, 1789, when the Constitution was made. And then we have a couple of years in the mid-19th century when the American Civil War broke out between the North and the South. Now, these historical events would not be able to be fully understandable unless, number one, we have a concept of past, and second, we have the macro units in order to divide the past and have a more, precise sense of a specific moment or a specific day or a specific year when a certain event occurred. Similarly, the future events which we schedule, we say that the next great World Cup in, let's say, soccer or in cricket would happen in such and such year. And all the nations which are going to participate for that World Cup begin to organize their players and begin to start for the competition, begin to make arrangements for participating in that World Cup, only because they have a very clear conception of the future event and the time when it would take place. So from a practical viewpoint, a future World Cup cannot be coordinated unless the participants have a very clear conception of the precise time, temporality, on which day and on which hour the competition would begin. So again, we find that the concept of future, again divided into macro and micro units, is a remarkable invention for human progress, and we simply cannot undermine it under some mystical notion that the division of time into future and past and present is artificial. So what if it is artificial? It is a useful artificiality. Now, there are a lot of things which are artificial, but which are very useful. Human beings have manufactured artificial reality in order to achieve certain goals and purposes. So the concept of future in the context of macro and micro units is a wonderful human invention, and we cannot discount it or undermine it. Now, of course, granted that future may not happen. We may schedule a future World Cup, but let's say a big war breaks out between nations, and therefore there's so much turmoil and there's so much massacre and so much killings, and the transportation has been disrupted, and people are simply not in a mood to have a World Cup. So in that case, even though the World Cup has been scheduled in the future, it may not happen, it may not occur. Similarly, on an individual level, we may schedule things in the future, but for our personal reasons or turbulence in our personal life, those future things may not happen. But that does not mean that planning in the future is useless or is meaningless. I think one difference between a progressive nation and a nation that has not been able to progress is that a progressive nation has a very clear conception of the future. And communities that plan for the future, the more into the future they go out and plan, the more likely they are going to be progressive. Because if you say, who knows about the future, and I don't know if I'm going to live tomorrow, and I don't know if our country is going to survive another year. If this is the view of the future, then of course you are not going to plan for the future, and you are not going to undertake activity that would produce results in the future. So I think from a practical viewpoint, individuals as well as nations and communities, they must plan for the future. And a good planning for the future is very useful in progressing a community from point A to point B. For example, you could say that our unemployment rate is 10% today, and we want to achieve a lower employment rate after 5 years. And what should we do in order to obtain a lower unemployment rate? Now, in order to plan this, of course you need knowledge and you need understanding of the economic forces, and you have to make certain assumptions and you have to make certain predictions, all of which may not come true. Granted that, I think uncertainty about the future is a given. And just because the future is uncertain does not mean that the future should not be planned. I think there's a big confusion in some individuals and in some communities that because the future is uncertain, therefore future should not be planned. Or they don't plan it very aggressively and very meticulously. But we have learned that cultures and communities and nations that very boldly and meticulously define the future, 5 years out, 10 years out, sometimes 15 years out, those nations are likely to do much better. There's no guarantee, of course, but that doesn't mean that the future should not be planned. So I think from practical temporality, we learn this big lesson that the uncertainty of the future should not stop us as individuals and communities and nations from planning in the future. And families that plan for their children, what they're going to do in the future, and the communities that plan for their citizens, and the city planners who plan the city for the future, that how much more traffic is going to be generated in the city, how many cars are going to be on the road 5 years from now, and what kind of roads and how many roads do we need in order to have a more fluid and efficient traffic. Now, this all requires that you've planned for the future. And I think this is one thing I want to emphasize over and over again, that you simply cannot live a life on the assumption that I don't know if future is going to happen, and I need not plan for the future because the future planning is so uncertain and there are so many unknown factors that future that I imagine may never occur. I think that's a very big mistake to think that way. Uncertainty, surely it is there, but to the best of your knowledge, you as an individual and as a family and as a community and as a nation, you should still have a vision of the future, and in order to translate that vision into reality, you must plan things and plan for the future. Similarly, a lot of people debunk the past. They think the past is gone, it is no longer reality, it's an illusion, it's a memory file, and therefore it has no practical value for the present. I think living only in the present is a big mistake. And we hear from some hedonistic circles and from some mystical circles, even from some religious, denominations, that the only way to live your life is to live in the present. And that present is so small that the argument is, per se ridiculous. That when you say you should live in the present, what does that mean? That you live in the millisecond, or you live in the second, or you live in the existing minute or the hour? I think the more macro unit you have to live your present, the more space you have in terms of time. So I think this ridiculous and absurd idea that you should live only in the present has no great significance in the realm of practical temporality. Well, let me moderate that a little bit. When people say you should live in the present, I think they are teaching us to be mindful of what we are doing in a given moment. For example, I am making this video at this time, and I'm mindful that I am making this video at this time. And even though this video is going to be 40 minutes or maybe more, I am every moment, whatever I'm saying on this video, I'm mindful of that. My mind is thinking, I'm articulating the ideas, and I am being recorded at the same time. But that doesn't mean that the ideas that I'm expressing have no past. Of course, the mere fact that I am speaking English is something that goes into the past. I learned English over a period of years. It is not my mother tongue, but I've been speaking it almost all my life. So to say that I should live in the present would simply mean that I deny the fact that I learned the language in which I am speaking way back. So it is simply impossible that I can make this video without recalling the past. The language I'm speaking, the ideas that I'm bringing forth and putting them together in this video, these ideas, even though I don't have a written script in front of me, but these ideas I have learned over a number of years. In fact, I've written about the temporality of law. And when I wrote that article, I was thinking of macro units and micro units, and I was studying different calendars, the Jewish calendar, the Islamic calendar, the Chinese calendar, the lunar calendars, the Gregorian calendar, the Iranian calendars. And so my knowledge on this video is coming from the past. It's coming from my memory files, which I have stored somewhere in my brain, or I don't know if it exists outside in some grand consciousness, and my mind is simply retrieving those files. I would explain that in another video. But from a practical viewpoint, wherever these files are located, whether in the big cosmic server or whether in the local C drive of my brain, wherever these files are located, these files are very important for me today to make this video. So past, the memories and the files belonging to the past, they are very significant and important for operating and organizing my life in the present and for the future. For example, I have a son. I have two sons, and they were born many years ago. And my memory files tell me that I have two sons. I know their names. I know how they look. I know how old they are. I know what grades they're in. Now, this information is very important for me. Even though all these files are in the past, these files are very important for me to successfully interact with my children. If these files are deleted, as they would be if I have dementia or if I have some other brain dysfunctionality, then it is quite possible that a person would not recognize their close relatives and family members. In fact, I remember that my mother, before she died, she could recognize very few people. And when I went back from the United States to see her, even though she smiled when she saw me for the first time, she could not understand or recognize fully, or at least she didn't say that she recognized me. So I don't understand fully what kind of files in her, consciousness have been corrupted or deleted that she could not fully recognize her own son. And even though every time I went before to see her, she always recognized me, and she knew that I was her son. But the last visit, her files, mental files, were not working, and therefore she could not fully recognize me. So we simply cannot discount or undermine the value of the past, which is preserved in the form of memories or in the form of folders and files. Just like we preserve data in a computer, sometimes we organize them in folders, and then within the folders there are files. And sometimes they are loose files, that don't belong to any folders. So I think our brains, whether they're the receivers or whether they're the memory chips are inside our brains, again, a different discussion. But from a practical viewpoint, past is important in order to function in the present. If I don't have all these files in my mind, I won't be able to function tomorrow. Even though if I have planned to go to the bookstore and have coffee and read a book in the cafe over there, let's say I planned that for tomorrow. Now this planning cannot occur if my files, memory files, are not working properly. For example, I should know where the bookstore is located. I should know how to get there. And I should know how to order coffee. I should know, many more things. I should know that I have to stop at the red signal. I should know that I can drive only carefully, and I just cannot drive erratically. All these behaviors which are needed in order to execute a very simple plan of going to the bookstore and reading a book and drinking coffee, these simple activities cannot occur unless my memory files are working efficiently and accurately. So I think from a practical viewpoint, the division of time into past, present, and future, this division is very significant. We can meaningfully distinguish things that have happened, things that are happening, and the things that will happen in the future. And I think our language, for example, the English language, very clearly instructs us how to distinguish a past event from a present event and a present event from a future event. For example, I went to the grocery store yesterday. I am making this video today, and I will go to the bookstore tomorrow. These statements are meaningful because each statement has a very special reference to the division of time. I went to the grocery store is a past event. I am making this video is a present event, and I will go to the bookstore is a future event. So I think without the division of time into these three segments, I would not be able to meaningfully distinguish going to the grocery store and going to the bookstore and making this video. So I think all these mystical notions and about the artificiality of time, and that we should live in present, and we should not live in the past, and we should not worry about the future, maybe they have some significance for therapeutic purposes, and I might explain that in a later video. But today I want to focus, and I have focused on two very important things. Number one, that future is very important. The concept of future is very important, both for individuals and communities and nations. This is so because we should actively plan for the future. Even though future is uncertain, but the uncertainty of that future should not prevent us from planning the future. So that's number one. From a practical temporality viewpoint, planning the future, remembering the past, and being mindful of the present, all three are very, very significant. And the second thing that I want you to pay attention to is the concept of micro units and macro units. I think the invention of micro units has been a great invention in order to produce and manufacture more precise phenomena and more precise interactions. And we simply cannot forget about the utility of micro units. I think cultures and communities that have no respect for micro units, they are less likely to progress materially and economically and even socially. I think there's a lot of social frustration if people don't come on time, or if they have a very gross concept of time. I think we are not machines, and I don't want us to convert into machines. I think we would remain human, and as humans, perhaps we would never be sensitive to milliseconds, but that doesn't mean we should not be sensitive to hours and minutes. So this is the two lessons, very broad two lessons of practical temporality that I want to emphasize in this particular video.